we're officially past time here. So I'm going to get going. Thank you guys, everyone, for joining today. This is a conversation about wild sats and how it's a new era of Bitcoin acquisition. So there's going to be some challenging ideas that come up here today because I'm convinced that the way we've been thinking about mining has got some problems. So let me get into it. Now, the first thing I want to do is figure out why the remote's not working. There we go. Okay. Question. We're going to try to make this a little interactive. We don't have, we got like 15 people in here. So we're going to try to make this a little interactive. So I want to ask a question, have people guess what this industry is. But before you do, let me first describe what each of these things are. So we're all on the same page, right? So emergent, that means it's spontaneous and it occurs from the bottom up, not the top down. Decentralized, no central point of control. Distributed, it's spread out across the map geographically. Disruptive means that it's upending a large incumbent, and it's manufactured in China. That's where the primary product is built. So, who wants to hazard a guess? What is this? Bitcoin mining. You are correct, and it also describes rooftop solar. And that's the industry I come from. So I got into rooftop solar about 20 years ago. And I pioneered the first residential rooftop PPA while I was in that industry. And that really transformed how people went about buying solar. And when I worked in that industry, I was working for a publicly traded company. I was competing with Elon's cousins at Solar City. And I did this until 2014 when I went on a walkabout. And during this time period, while I was on a walkabout, I met my now wife, a Portuguese woman, and discovered Bitcoin at the same time. And so my life restarted, entrepreneurial journey in Portugal and trying to figure out how I belong in the Bitcoin ecosystem. And eventually I got to mining and discovered wild sats. So let's see, does this work? Yes. So what are wild sats? Or not what, but why wild sats? Well, I realized I had this experience from rooftop solar where I used to go out to people's homes and I used to help them turn on their solar electric systems after the utilities gave us permission to do so. And I would see this giddy look in my clients' eyes, like little children when they would see their meters start to turn backwards as they were generating their own electricity. And I realized that there was the same experience that would occur with mining. When people generate their own sats through mining, they become sovereign in a way that you can't experience if you're buying your sats off an exchange. Tyler, you know, I know you know. I see you nodding your head and bobbing. It's a different emotional and visceral experience. And leaning into that hunch that was going to be something that could prove valuable, I have worked to help build SAS mining here. And there's a different visceral experience when you have a sovereign when you're generating your own sats. I'll talk more about it here in a minute, but I want to come back to a couple of simple things before I go much further, which confuse a lot of people when you don't think about them long enough, like I have, unfortunately. And the first one is the only way to create new Bitcoin is through mining. Now, let that sink in for a second. We often talk about Bitcoin as a 0 to 1 innovation. Absolutely is. But so is mining itself. It is a 0 to 1 innovation because it is the only way that you can take dollars into a hardware situation and get Bitcoin out. So the reason why that is a very important truth to understand, though, is because it leads to the most important question before you even start mining that you need to answer for yourself, which is, are you mining to accumulate Bitcoin? Or are you mining to generate fiat for yourself? Now, if you tried to say yes to both of those questions at once, you actually get a lot of confusion. And it's my strongly held belief that this confusion is what actually keeps a lot of people away from Bitcoin mining. Because us as an industry have tried to conflate both of those and say you can get some Bitcoin here if you sell your Bitcoin at the right time and pay for your electric bill. But no, if you just consider this as a way to acquire Bitcoin and look at it as a Bitcoin accumulation vehicle, which this is the only investment on the planet that you can invest dollars into and get Bitcoin out, then it leads to a whole different set of decisions and analysis. And so that's really where WildSats comes back into the conversation here is, are you choosing to acquire Bitcoin to accumulate it, or are choosing to mine to accumulate Bitcoin? Or are you choosing to do it because you want a fiat-based ROI? Now, I will know that this decision is starting to be made clear to people when I no longer have Bitcoiners come up to me and ask me what the ROI is of Bitcoin mining. Does that make sense? Yeah. All right. So let me take a moment just to define WildSats a little bit more clearly. So WildSats are Bitcoin in their purest form. It's directly from the network. These aren't tagged and bagged like you get when you buy them off of an exchange. And that's exactly how Satoshi designed the network, is for all Bitcoin to be distributed through mining, right? And so these sats are by definition a form of financial freedom, because the other side of the coin is wrangled sats, right? So the wrangled sats, these are the Bitcoin that you're purchasing on an exchange where they enforce the KYC rules that we all know and love, and it comes with surveillance. And that introduces counterparty risk. Everybody remembers FTX, right? And they also represent a honeypot for the state, right? Executive Order 6102, a lot of us know and quote that by heart, right? That's a honeypot. Coinbase right now could be a honeypot for the governments. Who knows, right? But when you're mining your own wild sats, all of that is avoided. And it's why Bitcoin mining is sovereign acquisition. There's nobody that's putting up a barrier between you and the flow of Bitcoin, and that has a lot of value. So talking a little bit more about wild versus wrangled sats, I want to just take a moment and see if anybody else has had this experience. Have you ever walked into a room thinking that maybe you were alone in the room, and then you notice a camera up in the corner and your behavior sort of shifts and changes as you suddenly realize you've been observed? Am I the only one that had that experience? Anybody else? Yeah, okay. Very normal, right? When you're observed, you behave differently than when you're not, right? So let me apply this to sats, and I like to call this like the Schrodinger's money. Now, Schrodinger's money, what's that, right? It's a thought experiment which comes from physics, which mathematically proves that the simple act of observing something changes the outcome. That's the Schrodinger's cat experiment, if you've ever heard of it, right? Now, I argue that this is occurring right now with our sats, because when you buy them off of an exchange, what happens is you have this psychological friction. Should I use them? Am I being observed if I'm using them? And what I experience with our clients is we're seeing our clients actually use their Bitcoin. They're actually sending them around. And so it's my strongly held contention that we need more miners to actually kickstart the circular economy, because we need more sats that people feel at liberty to use. And that's actually a sticking point for more medium of exchange use for our Bitcoin. So mining is how we get the wild sats, right? And we need them to prove Bitcoin's value as a medium of exchange. But are there other drivers to start mining? Absolutely, scarcity. So I don't know if anybody's been watching this particular chart over here. I'm going to attempt yes, it works. So you see this chart? This is the first time that I've seen this in Bitcoin's history, where as Bitcoin's price has been going up, the Bitcoin on exchanges is going down. That divergence, I suspect, is going to continue. And right now, on exchanges, there are 2.4 million Bitcoin. Now, global M2 is $107 trillion, right? That's a lot of money out there that ultimately could all flow into Bitcoin. And at today's price of 83,000, it would take 207 billion out of that $107 trillion to make all that Bitcoin on exchanges disappear. That's 0.2% of global M2. That is not very much. And it's, again, my strongly held belief that, yes, as the price goes up, more Bitcoin are going to come on exchanges. Maybe. That's not what's been happening lately. But it's my strongly held belief that there is a lot of fiat-rich people out there that in the same for the same reason that they have condos in New York City that they never visit, or beachfront homes in Hawaii that they never go to, that they're going to absorb this Bitcoin, and there's not going to be any Bitcoin on exchanges. And I don't know how long that process is going to take, but I truly believe that it will be anachronistic before too much longer to go to an exchange as a way to acquire Bitcoin. So the question is, how are you going to get Bitcoin if that truly comes to pass? And the answer is you're going to have to earn it. And the easiest way to earn it is actually through mining, because it's the direct way to earn your Bitcoin. Now, you could sell goods or services and hope that somebody with Bitcoin buys from you and you acquire Bitcoin that way. But in the future that we're heading to, I'm fairly confident most of us are going to have to become miners if we want to keep stacking the sats. So continuing on here, I'm going backwards. All right. So mining is the ultimate dollar cost averaging tool, full stop. And now, why do I call it a dollar cost averaging tool? Well, the reason I call it a dollar cost averaging tool is because what you're doing is you're taking a piece of hardware, a Bitcoin mining rig or an ASIC, and it's got a useful life of at least 3 years. So over the next 3 years, you're taking the value of that hardware combined with the electricity that it's going to take to run it, and you're consistently getting sats every single day. Now, that is the same thing as if you put that same amount of value onto an exchange and you dollar cost averaged every single day for the next 3 years. So the benefit of doing this, though, is that you not only are dollar cost averaging without having to think about it, having to monitor an exchange or anything. You make an upfront investment and you're just dollar cost averaging for the next 3 years, but you're also getting wild sats out of it. And doing this in the way that Satoshi designed the network, there's something that feels good about it. So this is why I call it the ultimate DCA. In fact, I like to think about it as a Satoshi's DCA. Gosh, I keep going backwards. Let's see. I think I've covered most of this. Yeah, and at the end too, there's also the value of your Bitcoin mining rig. You don't really know what the value is going to be, but just to give an example that I think is pretty interesting, the last cycle, the same hardware, dollars per terahash is how people think about hardware. And right now, $20 a terahash is a good number to think about when you're buying hardware. The top of the last cycle, the best equipment was $120 a terahash. So there is an opportunity to actually make money on hardware if the cycles repeat. So you don't ever know exactly what your hardware is going to be in the long term. Mining offers a strategic advantage as well, right? So we know that wild mining gives us truly free money. It helps us get Bitcoin when it dries up on exchanges, and it's the best way to DCA. But are there other reasons to mine it? Well, absolutely there is. And it's the same reason why we see strategy. We see nation states like Bhutan and El Salvador, and we see many individuals, is because having a strategic reserve allows for a different way to get ahead of the system, so to speak. All right. So wild sats are freedom to transact sats. Mining is this asymmetric opportunity that you can acquire Bitcoin before exchange liquidity dries up. Best way to dollar cost average, and nation states are using it as the reserve for sat stacking strategy, right? And the question that I often get after all of this is explained to clients is, why now? Why would I want to get started in this opportunity now? And the main reason is because it's more accessible than it ever has been, right? So there's companies like us that are making mining more accessible through the software-based experience. And the hardware, the way that the curves are going with the hardware is starting to level off, meaning the rate of efficiency gain with the hardware, it's not changing as fast. When mining first got started, hardware needed to be turned 3 6-month time periods. Now the useful life of hardware is closer to 3 years. So it's more stable. It's easier to build a business model around it. Let's see. I've covered all that already. So I want to come back to reiterate a point that I spoke about earlier, and that's just to talk about Sats flow over cash flow. So kind of coming back to that point that I mentioned earlier, right? So as Bitcoiners, we need to first get clear about what mining is. It's a tool for acquiring Sats, not stacking fiat. And and that SAT flow has a lot of advantages that we've talked about, but it makes the discussion of ROI irrelevant, right? And specifically, if you're asking that question, how long does it take for me to get my dollars back on the mining investment? It's actually the wrong question to be asking. The right question to be asking is, what's the price of the sats that I'm getting versus the price I would have purchased those for on the exchange? That's the right question. And the answer to that is actually really easy. It's a very simple equation. How many sats did I generate? How much electricity did, or how much did my service fees cost me to acquire those sats? You divide the two, and that's your cost of Bitcoin. So as long as you're acquiring Bitcoin at a lower cost than what you could buy it for on an exchange, it makes economical sense to acquire this way. So thinking like a Bitcoiner here, that's just what I want to get across. So we know the reasons to mine and we know the timing to start couldn't be better, and we know how to look at it, but can we feel good about mining today? And the answer is yes. And I like to use this metaphor because it resonates with me. I grew up on the furthest west point in the U.S. In Oregon, with stories of Oregon trails, the settlers and pioneers in my past, right? And I like to think of the pioneers are the ones that blazed the trail. They opened the West. They suffered greatly, ending up with the arrows in the backs and the animal scars, right, from actually opening up the trail. And then the settlers were the ones that come in behind them and, got the homesteads going. Well, the Bitcoin community's pioneer days are over, I would say. We celebrate those days when the white paper dropped, the pizza was purchased, WikiLeaks stayed afloat on Bitcoin, and the Silk Road proved that Bitcoin worked for commerce. And those pioneers, they all have scars for their effort, and we think of them heroically, I think. Or at least I do. Now, we're in the settler days now, though, that the miners are working hard to build a sustainable future, and we're already harnessing 57% carbon free power. So that's a good thing. And every generation of miner is building on the shoulders of the miners that came before. So there's a legacy, stability, and resilience that is now within the mining community that didn't exist even 5, 6 years ago. It's becoming mature. So that maturity and how to look at it, how the power is being sourced, this is all fodder to help make even the biggest holdouts not feel bad about getting into mining. And I would say that the 2.0 technology, which is being really spearheaded, is the heat recapture, right? And this technology is allowing, gosh, I can't keep pushing the right button here. Basically, heat recapture is allowing us to utilize mining in a different, unique way. And I do think that this is really technology 2.0. So what does this mean? Heat recapture. Tyler can talk about it better than I can, but at the end of the day, it's the ability to monetize the heat as well as the Bitcoin that's generated. And this is revolutionary. So I mentioned Tyler and picking on him a little bit because he just put out an amazing summit in Denver that was all about heat recapture. And genuinely, I think that event will wind up going down as a historic event because of the signal that was in that room. It is incredible, the fire in the tinkerer and the innovator and the builders corner right now to utilize this heat and turn it into value. And we're doing this right now in Norway with a 2.6 megawatt site. It's powering a building that is being used for a business center in a remote community in the Arctic Circle. It is absolutely a fantastic site. There, in fact, some of the heat on the site is actually drying fish because it's a fishing community in Norway. It's quite a cool site, but the showcase site is helping people to see that heat can be used. And in my opinion, it will be difficult in the future to mine without figuring out how to turn that heat into money because of the competition that's needed on the Bitcoin network. So the future of Bitcoin mining is quite sustainable. Now, one of the things that I think of when we came out of the gate to start SaaS mining, we started operating in 2023 with our first Bitcoin mines, and we realized, like looking around the industry, that we wanted to reimagine the mining experience. And so the first thing that we did is say, okay, let's make sure that we're putting people first, and having human centered design. And part of that is also aligning with the Bitcoin network and the transparency. So no hidden fees, no upcharges on rigs and power. And like Bitcoiners, we're going to align our incentives. So what that means is we don't make money selling hardware or electricity, which is pretty much the standard in the industry right now. Instead, what we do is take a small portion of the block reward on the back end as our management fee, just 15%. And that means that we now only are generating revenue if our clients are. And that forces us to make the decision strategically that our clients would want us to make. So it's a very different model that's not really occurring with anybody else, but customers have been beating a path to our door. And it's why you may not have even heard of us, because we don't advertise much, because we don't need to. Our biggest struggle is finding enough rack space to continue to keep up with client demand. And on top of that, we have a carbon-free mandate to make sure that our data centers are powered by at least 20% more carbon-free than the Bitcoin network. Right now, we're lucky and we have everything 100% carbon-free. It's all hydro, but this is how we're approaching the industry in a different way. And so far, our clients are saying that they like it. Now, the wild sats era is here. Financial freedom is freedom. And the wild sats are the way that we get here, right? They provide stability in an unstable world. And most importantly, there's a window of time where you can actually beat the herd to mining. I do think that it is going to be, the people that get into mining sooner are going to do better than the people that get in later, because there is asymmetric knowledge. It is 0 to 1. In the same way that studying Bitcoin took a long time before you got your head wrapped around it, the same happens with Bitcoin mining. And I think the sooner that you get involved, the better, because of the way that the liquidity is likely to dry up on exchanges. So having a head start there is the most important part. And with that, I'm actually going to turn it to workshop mode and let people ask me questions.